You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den, episode 34 with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson. You feeling fat? Wake up call to get out of your skinny fat skinny cycle so you can finally feel sexy with a man. Hey, if you want to get our new book, How to Meet a Quality Guy Without Having to Go on 200 Dates, don't forget you can get it at datingwithdignity.com for free. All right, now let's rock this interview with Susan. Hey, ladies, welcome to the Dating Den today. Oh, my gosh. I am so excited to introduce you, if you don't know this woman, Susan Peirce Thompson. We are going to talk about something that I don't really talk about much out there in the world, and that is the relationship to our physical self and our emotional self and weight. Wait. In fact, I'm doing a stop-start challenge this month, and I can't wait to share all this with Susan. But one of my things that I do, I realized, is that when I look at pictures, I totally categorize, like, oh, I look fat. Do I look fat? Do my arms look good? And there's totally been a relationship for me my whole life between my physical self, my emotional self, and how that impacted men. And so I know for a lot of you, you totally resonate. Some of you aren't in the physical body that you currently desire. You're not living your optimal, healthy self. And Susan's method is tried and true and proven and totally awesome. So listen up, get out a pencil and paper if that's what you do, or your phone so you can take some notes. And welcome, Susan Peirce Thompson. Thank you for coming to the Dating Den.
Oh, thanks, Marni. It's so great to be here.
I'm so excited to help inform women about your process. So for those of you who don't know, let me give you the official bio for Susan. She is an adjunct associate professor of brain and cognitive science at the University of Rochester and an expert in the psychology of eating. She is president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and CEO of Bright Line Eating Solutions, which is a company that is dedicated to sharing the psychology and the neuroscience of sustainable weight loss, which I love, and helping people live happy, thin, and free, which I love. She's the author of an amazing book. I think it's a New York Times bestseller, correct, Susan?
It is.
It is?
Indeed.
That's so awesome. So you want to get that book, Bright Line Eating, The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free. I know I am definitely going to be reading it. So Susan, I have to tell you, so I found out about you. I took your quiz.
What's your score?
I'm a 5.
You're 5. Okay, so everyone's a scale from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
5 is in the middle. And
5
so
is
the
in the
quiz
middle.
tells you how susceptible your brain is to food addiction, essentially. So Marni is moderately susceptible.
I am. So, and I think that if you would have done this like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I was like a 10 plus. So I'm like a recovering 10.
Read the instructions. The instructions on the quiz say, think back to a time in your life when your eating was at its worst and take the quiz as if it were then.
Oh, I'm a 10 plus. I'm a 10.
Take it again as if it were then, whenever you were insane with food, and put yourself back in that state of mind and see what score you get.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm going to do it, but I'm a 10. So I'm going to talk to you from my 10 brain.
You're so funny.
Yeah, so my 10 brain. And the reason why I think this is so interesting is like and this is why I'm a 10 plus, when I think back even to like middle school or high school, I would like diet, get a boyfriend, right? Have a relationship, binge eat, get fat, break up, go on a diet. Like that was my story.
And I
And
can relate to that.
right. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story because I looked at your before picture and I was like, no way. So how did you become passionate about food addiction and then translate that into really starting a revolution about Brightline and changing people's lives?
Oh, well, I mean, I came to it through through bitter experience. I mean, I earned it hard. My story with food and addiction just goes way back. I just discovered recently that I was chunky and heavy as a kid. I never thought of myself. I always thought I was a normal sized kid, but actually I'm looking back at pictures now and realizing that I was overweight when I was a kid, which I didn't really realize. But I definitely remember and was aware that I was overweight from the age of 12. I weigh less now than I did when I was 12. And as those pounds packed on, and then puberty hit for me on my 13th birthday, and I gained more weight as I went through puberty. I had that experience of not having the lithe, curvy little body that so many kids in high school did, so many girls did. I had a very apple-shaped, Humpty Dumpty sort of physique with like little legs sticking out that looked like toothpicks. And I was super self-conscious about my figure, especially my waistline being so big. And I wore big sweaters to cover up my stomach all the time. Didn't let anyone see my midsection. And and it affected my self-esteem around boys for sure. And I was dieting for sure. And actually what happened when I was 14 was I found drugs. They became my diet because they were the only thing that worked really. And the drugs got harder and worse and scarier for me. I went from, my first drug that I tried was a psychedelic. It was mushrooms. And I lost 7 pounds the night that I tried mushrooms for the first time.
You must have been like, damn, that works.
I was like woo!
Yeah.
I know. I was 124 pounds, and I got down to 117 pounds in one night of doing mushrooms. And I was like, what? And I basically just committed in my soul, like I'm doing this every chance I get, and I did until the age of 20. I did drugs as often as I could, and I graduated to crystal meth. I graduated from that to crack cocaine. Well, cocaine and then crack cocaine. I dropped out of high school. The drugs, obviously took on a life of their own, burned my life to the ground. And, and always in the back of my mind when I would consider stopping using drugs, it was like, but I'll get fat, and ultimately it didn't matter. Like I was so desperate to get clean. And I did when I was 20. So I haven't had a drink or a drug in 22 and a half years, but who's counting?
That's amazing.
Very grateful. It's the biggest miracle in my life, probably. Very grateful. I know not a lot of people get clean and sober and stay clean and sober. Certainly not on their first time. Certainly not from the age of 20. It's a I feel very lucky. And I got fat real fast and whacked on a ton of weight. And then, my drug and alcohol addiction just transferred to food addiction, essentially. Like all of a sudden, I remember in my first year of sobriety, like sitting on my bedroom floor with pots of pasta and bowls of cookie dough and like packages from fast food places and empty pints of ice cream sitting around me, and the TV was no longer playing shows because it was 4 a.m, so it was just going beep with the vertical lines. That tells how old I am. Back in the day when there were 4 channels and TV actually stopped playing at 4 a.m. And I remember looking around me and thinking, this is not sober living. This is not sober behavior. I am not sober. Like I am using. These are drugs and I am using. And it was super clear to me. And that didn't mean that I could stop, though. I couldn't stop. And for 8 more years, I struggled with food like that. And finally, I quit sugar. I quit flour definitively. I started weighing and measuring my food. I started eating 3 meals a day. And I took off all my weight. I went from obese to slender in 6 months. And so then in parallel to all that, I was getting my education. After I got clean, I went to community college and then transferred to UC Berkeley and did really well and spoke at the graduation and got a degree in cognitive science and went on to get a PhD in brain and cognitive sciences from one of the top 3 schools in the world. And, all that was going great, but I couldn't stop binging. I couldn't stop eating. I couldn't get into integrity with food. I couldn't control what I put in my mouth. Like I would pledge that I wouldn't eat something and then I'd be eating it. I would pledge that I'd have 1 piece of pizza and then I'd eat 5. And I couldn't get a handle on my food. I could do everything else, it seemed like, well in my life, but deal with my food. And so finally I got slender when I was 28. I've been in a right-sized body now since then. So that's coming up on 14 years,
Wow.
which statistically puts me in the top 1/100th of 1% of successful weight loss maintainers.
Damn,
1/100th
girl.
of 1%. Nobody does that. Nobody who's obese gets slender and stays slender for a decade. Like it's just, 1/100th of 1%. So I started teaching a college course when I became a tenured psychology professor. I started teaching a college course on the psychology of eating. And in that course, I included a really hefty unit on the neuroscience of food addiction. And I also, for many, many years, I was in a 12-step program for food addiction, and I sponsored a lot of people. I helped a lot of people to lose their excess weight. I got a lot of just sort of clinical type hands-on experience working with people who identified as food addicts and helping them to get thin. And I just learned the psychology of the recovering food addicts. I honestly, sometimes I know them better than they know themselves. I know why they're doing what they're doing. I know the tricks that their mind is playing on them. And so in 2014, I decided to write a book about the science of it, because 12-step programs are cool. Like they'll tell you what to eat and what not to eat, but they won't tell you the science. They don't know the science, and that's not they don't pretend to be scientifically based. That's not what they're about. But I thought the science really needed to get out there, so I decided to write a book, and that ended up, long story short, turning into the Bright Line Eating movement that now, over 500,000 people, so I think we're now at like 540,000 people have joined my email list in the 2.5 years I've been doing this. So it's a movement, and we've helped people lose over 300,000 pounds. It's just crazy in 2.5 years.
That is so amazing. So I'm like, first of all, jaw drop, like giving you a high five, standing ovation over here in the dating den. Like that is such an amazing story. And you're my soul sister, because I was totally in the 12-step realm in my 20s to sort of get back on that. And you're right, the science part was missing. It's still missing for me, so I'm going to probably be in your group. But I just think that this is such an important thing. And what you pointed out, which is really key for women who are listening to this that are resonating, is you substitute one addiction for another if you don't get to the heart of the problem.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, avoid feeling feelings, use drugs, don't do drugs. Avoid feeling feelings, use food, use men, use whatever it is. So what do you notice about the addiction part of it, and how does the brain science work? Why do we tend to do this?
Well, so the brain science of food addiction is the same as the brain science of cocaine addiction, is the same as the brain science of crystal meth addiction, is the same as the brain science of heroin addiction. Like we've taken harmless plants and we've turned them into drugs. In the same way we took poppies and turned them into heroin, and we took coca plants, coca shrubs, coca leaves, and turn them into cocaine. We take the inner essence of these plants and we refine and purify them into a fine powder, and we take something that's okay if ingested in its natural form. Like people put coca leaves on the inside of their cheek and chew them and suck on them, and they're not addicted. And there's actually a scientific paper published showing that coca leaves are not addictive. But you take that inner essence and you refine and purify it, and you get cocaine, which of course is addictive. So sugar and flour are drugs. We've taken the inner essence of beet and corn and wheat and rice and all these different plants, and we've refined and purified that essence into a drug. And what that drug does is the same thing as heroin and cocaine. It floods the nucleus accumbens with dopamine, like too much dopamine. So that part of the brain, it's the pleasure reward addiction center. It says, whoa, okay, A, that's kind of cool, and B, that's excessive. Like we don't need that much stimulation on board. Thank you very much. And the brain is super savvy. Now, some brains are more plastic and pliable in this regard than others, but the brain will modify itself so that the next time that onslaught comes, its response is more measured. What that means is literally it rewires itself to downregulate those dopamine receptors, which means it makes the receptors less numerous, less responsive. And then the next time you get a hit, it has a more muted response, which is great until you stop doing that drug. And now you need to use to feel normal. Like you're not using to get high, you're using to feel normal. So this is what a lot of people experience when they even contemplate, even ponder giving up sugar and flour. They feel desperate and bleak, and as if their life wouldn't be worth living without those foods. So that's the root of food addiction right there, is downregulation in the nucleus accumbens. And we see it on brain scans. It looks the same as heroin addiction. It's the same as cocaine addiction. Like, we have pictures of the brain. It's the same brain.
Wow. I love that you're sharing this, because I think what we do then, especially with food, because it's, I always used to say when I was in my 12-step world, like, I wish I was an alcoholic, or, because, you just don't go to the bar. But with food,
Right.
you settle up to the bar stool every single day. And so then we beat ourselves up, right? Like when you say, you make that resolution, I'm having one piece of pizza. And, so why do we beat ourselves up? And what is that false coping mechanism? And why is it ineffective?
Well, I mean, I think different of us, some of us are harder on ourselves than others.
Yeah.
Right. So, some of us are really brutal to ourselves and, treat ourselves worse than we've ever treated anyone on this planet, ever.
Yeah.
That is actually a separate issue. Some folks who eat addictively do that, and some folks don't. It's not that uncommon. And, part of the root of that is that years of watching yourself betray yourself with food, those years result in you coming to a seemingly obvious conclusion, which is that you don't love yourself, you don't value yourself, and you shouldn't trust yourself. Because when you watch yourself promise yourself one thing, really meaning it, and then do another thing with food, you're betraying yourself. And in the same way that you would come to feel disgust for someone who told you every week for years that they would meet you on Wednesday at noon and then stood you up, assuming you would still show up for a date like that, or even make a date like that every week for years. If you did, and the person stood you up, promising, swearing, I will be there this time, and then stood you up, you would feel like a degree of contempt for them that would be warranted. And that's essentially what you've done to yourself. You've promised that you were going to stick to it this time, and then watched yourself talk yourself out of it because it's a Friday night and it's been a hard week and you deserve, to let loose with the girls, and you watch yourself eat a bunch of food that you promised you wouldn't eat. So there's nothing like food addiction to make you hate yourself, essentially. The good news is that that's reversible by building up your integrity again with yourself around food. And that's what I teach in my program, is a very simple method for writing down what you're going to eat the night before, and the next day eating only and exactly that, and getting sugar and flour out of the mix so that you're not, you're slowly breaking that addiction. And even one day of actually doing it, actually eating exactly what you committed to eat, starts to put a brick in the wall of your personal integrity again. And you come to actually realize that you don't hate yourself nearly as much as you thought you did. You thought you did because you kept betraying yourself with food. But once you start doing right by yourself with food, you realize that actually there's a level of self-love that was there all along. And now that you're finally in integrity with your eating, it starts to really shine through.
I love that, because it is back to getting to that place of realizing that you're lovable, that you're worth it, that you're deserving. And you're women with dating, they say, I want a guy whose words and actions match,
Right.
and then we look at ourselves and we're like, shit, like, am I in integrity with the choices that I'm making? So let me ask you this, since you are the brain science goddess. So when we are sort of stuck in that food addiction loop, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of emotional currency to kind of manage that. So why is it hard to be emotionally available to be in relationship when you are in an addiction with food? Why is it harder?
Oh, well, first of all, it's hard to show up to dates in a body that you don't like.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yep.
Right? I mean, constantly picking the clothes based on how much they can hide and cover up, what your shape really is. And just kind of wishing that, you were in a different body like that. I lived that way for, pretty much all of my life, up until I finally broke free and got into a right-sized body. It was really hard to show up to men or to dates, in a body that I didn't love. But, I think another aspect of it is that integrity piece that I was just talking about, like when you watch yourself betray yourself with food, it hollows out your self-esteem, your self-efficacy, your sense of belief about your worth, and it fundamentally convinces you that you're not trust, that it makes you think that you have deep-seated psychological issues, because only someone who has deep-seated psychological issues would continue to work so hard at something and promise themselves one thing and then seemingly mysteriously like dupe themselves in a moment of indulgence into acting in flagrant contrast to what they knew that they were trying to achieve with their life, right? So you start to think, well, it seems insane. Like, I must be crazy. Why do I keep doing this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's wrong with me. And so you start to feel like you have like quote unquote issues, right? When really it's food addiction in the mix, and you're acting just like you should act with a brain wired the way yours is. And you just need a simple solution for that. And then suddenly it becomes much easier. Like when you've got a few bricks in that wall of integrity around food, you don't even have to be all the way into a right-sized body yet. You just start to feel a little swagger. Like you start to feel like, I'm worth something, and I've been showing it, and I'm on track, and I'm like in alignment here. And like, hey, what's your name? Like it just starts to feel, you just start to feel, I don't know if I can swear on your
Yes,
podcast.
you can totally. It's in the den.
You start to feel your badassery,
Yes.
like, I'm rocking here, like, yeah, I got something to bring to this party,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about the solution. So first of all, I think there's the physical component as it relates to your emotional availability and your self-worth. Then let's just talk about, your health. And I think you have the statistic in your book that 63% of people are dying prematurely from diet-related diseases. So talk to me about like if you can't do it, like when I got my shit together in my relationship world, it was like, if I can't do it for myself, do it for my kids. Right. Because I didn't want to teach them. I had 3 daughters. If you can't do it for yourself right now and you have kids or you have people in your life or you just want to live a long time because you have a lot of stuff to do while you're here, like talk to me about that statistic.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, Marni, I have 3 daughters. Yeah. I have 3 daughters.
I know.
How old are your daughters?
21. Oh my God. 18 and 14. What about you?
The twins will turn 9 next week, so almost 9, and 5.5. So I'm
girlfriend,
in the weeds.
you
I'm
are
in the weeds still.
You are. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
And people warned me about the ages that you just named, and I'm sorry. I'm looking forward. Like, I would rather have a surly, disrespectful, angst-ridden girl with a bunch of swear words on her lips than a toddler that needs their ass wiped. I'm sorry. Like, I just would.
That's so funny. You know what? Well, I'm going to tell you one thing, and then we'll go back to this. I remember getting on an airplane with my 3 daughters, and these people traveling, and they'd be like, "Oh, honey, you just wait." Yeah. And I was like, you know what? That's a limiting belief. That is not true. And I got to tell you, I have amazing daughters and no angst, and yes, some surly, and yes, whatever, but you do not have to go down that path. It'll be amazing.
I love it.
I love it.
I believe it.
Daughters are fun. Okay. So we got to do it.
So what was
for
the
our
question?
people. The question is,
health.
Health. Yeah, like people we're dying. Like we're dying from this stuff.
Yeah, and gobbling down medication. Yeah,
yes,
totally. And with pre-diabetes like on the horizon, or pre-diabetes here and diabetes on the horizon, or diabetes here and like a stroke on the horizon. Like, yeah, it's ugly. It's really ugly what we're doing to ourselves. And there's other things in the mix that people don't talk about a lot, but it's very expensive to be obese. George Washington University just put out a cool study a year or 2 ago that looked at the hard, tangible costs of being obese in America. For a woman will spend over $6,000 a year that she doesn't need to spend because she's obese. I'm talking about like extra gas in your car. You don't even realize the expenses, the extra insurance, the extra this, that, and the other. And that's not even counting the cost of the extra food. Like if you're running out to satisfy a craving, that candy bar, whatever that cost, you didn't need to spend that money. So, Yeah, it's horrific, and we can't afford it as a society. We're going to spend $47 trillion over the next 20 years due to the effects of our weight. And right now, a third of us are obese. By 2030, 50% of us are going to be obese. Like 80% will be overweight or obese, and 50% will be obese. And we can't afford it, like in any way, shape, or form. We can't afford it personally, interpersonally, financially, societally. We got to make some changes.
Damn. It really is an epidemic. And I think this is really important because it's not just about, nothing fits me or I hate shopping for size 14. This is like, it can kill you, right? It can kill you in a lot of different ways, financially, emotionally, physically.
Yeah. And what the toll that bothers me the most is the subtler one, because this is now coming from a woman who lived in an obese body, who knows what it's like to have a really hard time tying your shoes, to wear slip-on shoes because tying shoes is hard. What I hate most is the wasted lives. When I was obese, I was so focused on losing weight, and so much of my life energy was focused on either dealing with the clinical depression that I suffered with, which was a direct effect of the food I was putting in my mouth, or when you give people surveys, someone who's overweight or obese is really likely to tick off a box that says, I'm waiting for my life to begin till I lose the weight. I'm waiting till I lose the weight. I'm not, in other words, whoever it is out there who's going to learn how to desalinate water and figure out cold fusion and negotiate peace in the Middle East, they're trying to lose weight. They're not even thinking about what they should, getting an engineering degree, because they're starting their fourth diet this year. The average American tries 4 or 5 new diets each year. 108 million Americans try 4 or 5 new diets each year. It's like, are you kidding me? Do you know what a waste that is of human potential? If we could just be living in a right-sized body free from food obsession, so that's the happy, thin, and free part. It's the free that matters to me more. I don't want 60% of your psychic energy taken up by what you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on your plan or off your plan, whether you've been to the gym today, how many calories is in that thing you're about to eat. That's just a waste of a life. And that's what upsets me more. I don't want to be on that hamster wheel anymore. I want to be free.
I love that, because it's the getting ready to get ready. And women who are listening here, this is a dating podcast. I know, girlfriend, you're like, I can't date until I can't date until I lose 10 pounds. I can't, I had a client once who said to me, I don't have any limiting beliefs. It's just, I just need to lose 20 pounds before I date.
That's great.
Right? And I'm like, hello. So yes, it so becomes funny. An excuse and a reason why we are not living our life. We're, waiting to start living until. So let's talk about, if we can, some of the key steps in your program, because there are these 4 bright lines. So can you give us a little taster, and why is this different than those 4 that, my listeners have already tried, and it's only 4 months into the year?
Well, every diet that I know out there, except for a couple of 12-step programs for food addiction, but every diet that I know out there focuses on, telling you what to eat and not to eat and how to move your body. So there's a mistake right there. First of all, exercise should not be a part of your weight loss strategy. Exercise sabotages your weight loss strategy. And the reason is that the reason has to do with willpower, essentially. There's no way to succeed as a healthy eater, if you have a brain like mine or yours, Marni.
Yep.
There's no way to succeed as a healthy eater in this society on the basis of willpower, because willpower abandons you all the time. It's just a neurological fact that the place that willpower lives in the brain gets exhausted by just 15 minutes of activity, and checking email exhausts it, being in traffic exhausts it, dealing with kids exhausts it. It's no wonder we turn to our friends on Friday night and say, hey, let's just order pizza, or let's go out and get, nachos and drinks. There's a reason why we do that. Because our willpower, module, which is the anterior cingulate cortex, it gets exhausted. And so there's the willpower gap. That's what I call it, the willpower gap. And you're going to fall into it all the time. The only way around that is to automate your eating. I mean, build habits around it that are so well-oiled, that are so automatic, that your healthy eating happens whether you're thinking about it or not. There's no choice involved. So like brushing your teeth. Most people relate to brushing their teeth, whether they want to or not, whether they're in the mood or not. It's not really a question of whether they're in the mood. They just execute the behavior without even thinking about it. They get it for free. Cognitively speaking, they get it for free. And that's what your eating's got to become. Now, it takes time to set that up, though. Automatic habits don't just come right away. On average, they take 66 days to develop, and that's a simple one-off habit. I'm not talking about like changing all of your eating habits. I'm talking like starting the habit of drinking a glass of water upon arising in the morning would take you 66 days on average to automate, research shows.
Wow.
So if you got to automate your entire eating life, you need to dedicate a few months up front to doing that. And it's going to tap your willpower big time. And spending willpower getting to the gym or doing whatever you're going to do in the gym is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because you do not have enough bandwidth in a busy life to do all of that at the same time. So exercise is great, but during the weight loss phase, I want you wearing your bunny slippers and not exercising. And this always like freaks people out, but it really is true. Like, wear your bunny slippers, rest. Weight loss is exhausting. It's a temporary one-off phase that is, just get it done. So that's the first thing. Don't exercise. And then, the other thing that a lot of other programs do is they build in all kinds of snacks. And if you think about what I just described, that willpower is going to fail you, expecting to be eating 6 times a day and do it successfully with eating the right things it's kind of like, what if your dentist told you, yeah, you need to brush and floss now 6 times a day. I want you to have your toothbrush and your toothpaste and your floss on you, and every day execute that 6 times a day. Like, what are the odds that that would go well for you? I don't know about you, but for me, it wouldn't be happening.
No,
right?
And I think this is kind of what I was talking about, is that for the person who has like this food addiction, it's like going to the bar 6 times a day. And right? And it's like, you know
Too
what?
many times.
Yeah, I mean, like, that beer looks really frosty. It was okay in the morning, like we're all good on our diet in the morning, but like 4 o'clock, you're like, fuck it. So yeah, don't go 6 times to the bar.
Right. 3 times, like, really. And another reason is that the automaticity that we're looking for here, it's triggered by cues. Just like brushing your teeth, if you try to do it at 4 p.m, it wouldn't go well. You need to brush your teeth at night and in the morning. Why? Because time of day and location trigger the execution of the automatic action sequence, essentially. So breakfast is good for that. You wire it into your morning routine. Dinner is good for that. You wire it into your evening routine. And midday, luckily, we still have a time to stop, working or whatever. And, if you've packed your lunch, then, just midday comes and you just turn and you grab your cooler bag and boom, your perfect, healthy, immaculate lunch is right there to eat. And all of a sudden, healthy eating seems so easy. It's about writing down your food the night before, not eating the foods that are addictive. Those are sugar and flour, 3 meals a day. And if you sense that you're someone who's going to want support with that, Bright Line Eating is here. We've had, 10,000 people go through our boot camp and lose like a lot of weight, So
Absolutely. And I think from the little research I've done is that social support and positive feedback, right, actually anchors to creating new neural pathways and reestablishing new behaviors, right? Like, actually having that support is kind of critical.
Essential.
Yeah,
it's really
critical, right?
Heck yeah, totally. And the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp has tons of that. We've got the most amazing, vibrant online community ever. It's so cool. Yeah.
I love that you have because I'm just thinking back to my days in the 12-step food realm. I love that you've sort of taken a lot of those things that I feel like worked for me, and you've sort of added a lot of different pieces to it that just makes it so robust and so real. Because, if you've got this thing, if this resonates for you, it is something worthy of saying, I'm going to handle this. And like you said, focus on it and relearn a different way to be so that you can show up for your life authentically in your right size body and your right size brain, like the one that's meant to be here.
Totally, totally. It's a game changer. I mean, for a lot of us who resonate to this food issue, we're nodding our heads like, yeah, I've got that food issue, to a greater or lesser degree. Not everybody's got it, to the pathological degree that I have it, for example. But for those of us who resonate with this, it's like our eating is a keystone habit. And so things like your dating, your sleep, your work productivity, like all those things fall into place when you get your eating handled. Like when your eating's out of whack, everything feels out of whack. When your eating is dialed in, everything feels doable. That's the definition of a keystone habit, that when you get it dialed in, everything else in your life gets better. It's not just a one-off thing. It's not like drinking a glass of water every morning, which would be nice, but it's not going to make, everything else in your life work better. But getting your eating right, for a lot of us, it actually is one of those things. It's a game changer.
Absolutely. And my client, is doing the Bright Line, like literally that was what happened. She was like, I'm doing this program. I've lost these 7 pounds. Like my work is picking up. I feel like I'm now got more energy to date, right? Because that all of those things that it does to you, that weight, right, on your shoulders and on your body, is removed so you can show up and be present in all of your life. So my last question is, I know in your book you talk a lot about mantras, and I believe in that and self-talk. And could you just talk to me a little bit about why this is sort of part of your process?
Well, we could do more with mantras than we do in Bright Line Eating. The role that they play in Bright Line Eating is really to get us through those moments where there's a bunch of food on offer that's not on our plan, right? And so you got to have something to kind of say in your head when it's like, okay, I'm in the teacher's lounge now, but someone brought in donuts and, it's 10 in the morning, it's not mealtime, and like I'm not eating that food. So we would say to ourselves something like, that's not food, that's poison to me. That's not food, that's poison to me. Or, if we're believers, thank you, God, that's not my food. Thank you, God, that is not my food. Or don't eat no matter what, just don't eat. And we don't mean, become anorexic. We mean if it's not mealtime, right? Don't eat no matter what, just don't eat. And so just, having a really clear, strong. So in the dating world, it might be like if you're of the ilk of, like I'm going to wait for him to call me after the first date, right?
Yes.
It's like, don't call him no matter what, just don't call him. I'm not calling him today. You know what I mean? Like that phone is not a comfort to me. That's a poisonous snake right there, So it's kind of the same thing, right? You got to kind of talk yourself through being strong at certain times. And that's where we use mantras.
Totally, because really, always say how you define yourself impacts what you do and how you do it, right? So if you're defining yourself as like, that is poison to me, right? I am a dignified dater. I don't I don't call and say, why didn't you call me? When you said you would, or send texts longer than a thumb, like that is really, really important, because we talked earlier in our conversation about integrity with ourself, right? And so it's, instead of like, what's wrong with you, it's that this is who I am and this is what I stand for. And having that be like, I love you said, if you're a believer, right? Because this is about believing in yourself and your life, and really being in integrity with how you treat yourself.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh, never sending text longer than a thumb. You just gave me a heart attack. I'm like, oh my God, I send a lot of long text messages.
Well, I call it the rule of thumb. So there you go. A little tip.
A little freebie for me. Okay.
A little freebie, yes.
Oh,
when the time is right, you teach it to your 3 daughters.
Love it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So in the show notes, you can find out all about Bright Line Eating. Take the quiz. I'm taking mine over. Because
Do you like how I called you out at the beginning of your own podcast? I'm like, you totally did that wrong.
Oh my God. No, I totally did do it wrong. And what's really funny is you were like describing your moment like on the floor with the TV. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so 10. Like, I have memories of like when the Challenger went down. I remember what I was eating.
Right?
I was binging on rice. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you're our people, I think this is if you're listening and you are our people, I think Bright Line would be a really great choice. Say yes to this today. Susan, I love you. I definitely one day will hug you and meet you in person because we're soul sisters.
I love it, Marni. Yay.
And congratulations on your book. And I'm just really excited about the work that you're doing. I love that you are creating a movement. I think it's so important. We all need to be here a little longer than we default to, because we do have so much to give. And just like, there's cancer to be cured by you not focusing on losing weight, there's a guy out there who is dreaming of someone just like you. And if you are just focused on every day getting ready to get ready and changing your body and not being enough and all that, like, he's waiting for you, girlfriend. Like, there's relationships to be had and babies to be born and the world to be filled with loving, peaceful, happy people who are thin, happy, and free. So thank you so much for being here. And ladies, don't forget, date with dignity. We'll talk to you soon.